Elias Bergman was a 36-year-old man who lived alone on his old ranch facing the eastern slopes. The sunlines etched into his face revealed a life spent in solitude and caution. That morning had started no differently from the others. He was trying to repair a broken barn door with rusty nails in his hand, but something was keeping him from focusing. He had noticed marks of something being dragged across the ground, and when he looked closer, he realized it wasn't just the trail of an ordinary animal. Dark stains, fresh blood that hadn't dried even under the sun, stretched over the rocks and under dry grass, all the way toward the water well. As Elias reached for his rifle, a strange feeling washed over him. It wasn't the usual suspicion that came with the idea of a wounded wild animal. It felt more like a warning of trouble getting closer. And when he got to the well, the sight before him didn't calm his doubts, it only doubled his fear. Leaning against the stone wall was a severely wounded native warrior. His face was covered in dirt, and thick red blood was oozing from the hand pressed against his right side. His other hand was trembling as it reached up toward the water bucket hanging 3 meters above. His breathing was shaky and uneven, but the moment he saw Elias, his eyes sharpened like a blade. Not out of fear, but from a fierce will to survive. It was the look of a man who had no choice but to stay alert in a world where death could come from anywhere. Elias's fingers rested on the trigger. Everyone always told him the same thing. The only thing more dangerous than a wounded native is a wounded and thirsty native. Shoot on sight. But Elias saw something else in those eyes, not just hostility, but humanity. He remembered his own moment of thirst during the drought 3 years ago, when he went 3 full days without water. That thirst had almost killed him, and what he saw in the warrior's eyes was exactly that same desperation. Wasser. The word barely escaped the native's cracked lips, but it was enough to make Elias slowly lower his rifle. A single moment of choice could change the course of a lifetime, and that choice was being made right here, by an old stone well. Elias pulled up the bucket, hesitating a bit. A part of him still said, "If you leave him here, maybe he won't hurt anyone." But another voice, deeper and older, whispered, "Kindness isn't a gamble, but sometimes it costs the most." Elias handed the water over and held it to the warrior's cracked lips. The man drank greedily, desperately, and with every gulp, a new line was being drawn in Elias's fate. He didn't know it yet, but Elias would soon learn that this man wasn't just any native, that those who came after him wouldn't just be a few, that after this act of kindness, hundreds of men on horseback would soon trample his lands, and that some secrets would set the whole region on fire, because the warrior he had helped was both enemy and hope, and at the heart of a massive lie. When Elias looked closer at the man's wound, a cold chill ran down his spine. This wasn't the result of a bear attack or some accident. This was an execution attempt. A bullet wound, gunpowder stains fired from close range. And if this man had been shot up close, the shooter might still be nearby. Maybe the blood trail he was following had just become Elias's trail too. Now they were in it together. The native raised his eyes to the horizon, then made a throat-slashing gesture. The message was clear. Danger was near. Alarm bells rang in Elias's head. The voice inside him was now shouting, "Leave him, or you're next." But leaving him here would be the same as signing his death sentence. Elias couldn't carry him, but he could hide him. Maybe the old root cellar out back could be an escape route. But before he could make a plan, the ground shook. A sound he had known for years echoed in his ears. Hooves. Fast, heavy, and many of them. A group of riders was approaching from the horizon. 6 or more. And each one moved like a harbinger of death. Elias stepped between the well and the warrior. One hand held the rifle. The other held his conscience. This wouldn't just be a fight to survive. It would be a reckoning with all the old prejudices of the past. And the reckoning was about to begin. The sound of hooves was shaking the ground. Elias's fingers had turned white around the rifle grip, but his eyes were steady. The breathing of the wounded warrior lying next to the well seemed to compete with Elias's own heartbeat. The riders emerging from the horizon were approaching like a storm cloud. The first silhouette to become clear through the dust was the leader's. A man whose blonde hair flew in the wind and whose face still carried the harshness of his youth, Lucas Weber. Right behind him were 5 more men of varying ages, rifles in hand, knives on their belts, and a hard resolve in their eyes. All of them had their eyes locked on Elias. Lucas slowly dismounted from his horse. The others formed a circle and carefully touched their weapons, while Lucas calmly walked toward Elias. "You seem a little tense for this early in the morning, Bergman," he said, with a cold, sly tone in his voice. Elias held his breath. "What do you want?" Lucas gave a slight smile, but his eyes didn't smile with him. "We saw some signs that something happened here. Blood. Fresh, too. Did you cut someone, or did someone cut you?" Elias could hear the wounded warrior breathing behind him. Any sound, any movement could cost all of them their lives. "I found an injured animal while working at the barn this morning," Elias said, trying to stay calm. "The blood trail must be from that. What are you doing here?" Lucas glanced at the well, then at the stains on the ground. One of the men behind him, Eric, who stepped carefully with sly eyes, reached for his pistol. "That's exactly what we were going to ask. We followed the blood trail, and it led us here. There's a rumor going around that a stranger passed through. Could it be someone hiding on your land?" A storm raged inside Elias. His mind immediately went to the warrior's identity and how dangerous those pursuing him could be. The warrior on the ground was holding his breath, trying to become invisible like a ghost. But as Lucas looked around, he noticed something. Fresh blood dripping on the stones around the well. He slowly approached Elias, his steps threatening and deliberate. "Look, Bergman, there's no bad blood between us from the past. But if we find signs of a native here, you'll be in big trouble. The law is a lot harsher now. For you and for that man." Elias hesitated for a moment. The weight of lying to protect the truth suddenly hit him like a heavy load on his shoulders. But he didn't forget the promise he had made to himself. A life should be saved no matter what. "There's no one here," he said firmly. "Just me, doing my work." Lucas narrowed his eyes and stared at Elias's face. Then he crouched down and touched the blood drops with his fingertips. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. One of the men in the back suddenly shouted, "There's something behind the well." All the weapons were raised in an instant. Elias's instincts kicked in. He took a step toward the warrior, placing himself protectively in between. When their eyes met, there was both a thank you and a warning in the warrior's gaze. At that moment, one of Lucas's men, Max, a name never heard before, with eyes like a hungry wolf, quickly headed for the well. But Elias extended his rifle between them and raised his voice in a threatening tone. "Take one more step, and you won't like what happens next," he said, his voice firmer than ever. Max froze. Lucas gave a small nod. "If you're hiding something, Elias, there's no law that can save you," he said coldly. "We'll be back. And next time, we won't be looking for you, we'll be looking for your secrets." The riders rode away one by one, but their eyes stayed on Elias. The silence was broken only by the wind howling and the blood dripping onto the dirt. Elias knelt down and checked the warrior's pulse. The wounded man slowly opened his eyes. "If they find me, they won't just burn me, they'll burn everyone," he said in a hoarse voice. "My name is Noah." Elias nodded. "I'll help you," he said. But deep down, he felt there was a much bigger storm hiding in Noah's past. The kind of storm that would change not just the path of these riders, but the fate of the entire region. And Elias was now right in the middle of it. Everything was a blur in Elias's mind. His hands were stained with Noah's blood, and Lucas and his men's threatening words echoed in his ears. The peaceful solitude he was used to on the ranch had been replaced by a constant state of alert. As the sun climbed higher, Noah's wound started bleeding again. Elias tore up an old shirt and wrapped the bleeding spot, doing his best with what first aid knowledge he had. Noah tried to speak in short breaths, every word sharp and cut with pain. "If they find me, they won't just take me. They'll take everything from you too." Elias paused for a moment, his mind burning with questions. "Who are you? Why do they want you dead?" Even through the pain, Noah gave him a proud look. "They blame me for something I didn't do. The blood isn't just on my body, it's on my name. A trap set in the middle of a peace treaty, and I was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Just then, a thin column of smoke rose in the distance. When Elias looked out the window, he saw Lucas and his men setting up camp in the woods nearby. They were going to come back, he was sure of it. They would spend the night there and return at first light to search the ranch more carefully. What troubled Elias the most was why these men were so persistent. There was something about Noah, his identity and story, that went beyond justice. There was a rage there, something personal. As nightfall approached, Noah started to regain his strength. When Elias handed him a bowl of hot soup, Noah showed him a charm he held in his hand. an old silver medallion engraved with a tribal mark and an eagle. If you find this, it means my family still trusts me. This is both my identity and my secret, he said. When Elias took the medallion in his hand, a cold shiver ran through him. For the first time, he realized that the blood in his veins ran deeper and older than this land. The fire in Noah's eyes was the fire of a man torn between peace and revenge. Noah's voice trembled as he continued. The ones who broke the peace treaty are the ones who want to push us into war. I was there that night. I saw an innocent man die. They pinned it on me. Now everyone's after me, even my friends. But the real danger isn't in that camp, it's higher up, in the hands of bigger men. They don't care about anyone. They'll sacrifice hundreds of lives for money and power. Elias looked at Noah. At that moment, a noise came from outside. The door slowly opened, and Elias's neighbor, Anna, walked in. She held a few old medicine bottles and had a mix of concern and confusion on her face. I saw Lucas's men. Something's about to happen. What's going on, Elias? I'm worried about you, she said. Elias hesitated for a moment, but he knew he could trust Anna. He explained what had happened. Anna checked Noah's wound and applied a salve made from healing herbs. As she glanced sideways at Noah, she whispered, "Hiding him puts you in danger." But despite his fear, Elias had made up his mind. I gave water to a life. Leaving that life now would be betrayal. Anna nodded, but at that moment, the sound of hooves echoed again on the horizon. The men were coming through the dark. This time they looked more numerous, more furious. Elias, Noah, and Anna quickly moved Noah to the old cellar at the back of the ranch. In the darkness between the roots, they held their breath and waited. Outside, Lucas's voice rang out. "Bergman, this is your last warning. Hand him over or you'll burn with him." In that moment, Elias came face to face with all his old fears and prejudices. The weight of a life, the cost of justice, and the challenge of standing on the side of what's right all came crashing down on his shoulders in a single night. Dark clouds hovered over the ranch. The men outside weren't just Lucas and his gang anymore. Something much bigger was now part of this story. And Elias knew that the path he'd chosen was leading him to a war at the edge of darkness and light. Between the stone walls of the cellar, Elias and Anna's breath mixed in the cold air. Noah leaned against the damp ground, trying to suppress the pain. Elias listened to the footsteps outside, the whispers of the men in the dark, and the threats echoing like disaster waiting around every corner. As Anna wiped the sweat from Noah's forehead, she whispered, "If they find us, none of us are getting out of this." But there was a stubborn fire burning inside Elias now. The kindness he had started couldn't go unfinished. Lucas's voice outside only fed that fire. Each word cornered Elias more and more. "That's enough. This is your last chance, Bergman. Give us the man, or burn with your ranch." A short silence followed. Then gunfire rang out, warning shots fired into the air. The riders were positioned outside the cellar like they were ready to set everything ablaze. Elias hesitated for a moment, and Anna gripped his arm in fear. "Don't give him up. If there's injustice here, let it be exposed in front of everyone," she said, afraid but firm. Elias cracked open the stone door of the cellar and slipped outside. Standing in the middle of the night with his rifle in hand, he faced Lucas. And this time, Lucas wasn't just surrounded by his own men. There were other faces now, other groups. Some driven by old grudges, some just there to watch. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was about to become a reckoning. "Listen, Elias. This isn't your fight. Don't throw yourself into the fire for a stranger," Lucas said. His voice was softer now, but there was steel underneath. Elias didn't hesitate. "If you give a man water, you don't feed him to the wolves," he answered. Lucas gave a signal. His men started searching the barn and around the house. The fear inside Elias had turned into anger. In this moment of fate, there was no longer any doubt about which side he was on. Just then, another group of riders was heard approaching from the distance. Under the moonlight, their silhouettes became clear. The sound they made wasn't like a gang, it was more than that. Back in the cellar, as Anna tended to him, Noah glanced at her gratefully. His eyes lit up with a new glimmer of hope. "They might be my people," he said, struggling for breath. Anna moved to the window to look outside. "There's a lot of them coming. This place is about to become a battlefield." When Lucas's men noticed the new arrivals, their formation wavered. The newcomers were from Noah's tribe, following the lead of an older man. When their horses stopped, silence and tension blanketed the ranch like a heavy fog. Everyone was sizing each other up. In that moment when no one trusted anyone, a single spark could ignite the entire fire. The tribe's elder dismounted and approached Elias. His eyes were filled with the weight of a life well lived. He was looking for his son, but watching everything else too. Lucas had to take a step back. The numbers were no longer on his side. But he didn't look like someone who would give up easily. The old man looked Elias straight in the eye. "Which side are you on?" he asked in a deep, tired voice. Elias replied, "I just gave a man some water. Now I've become everyone's enemy." The old man nodded. Sometimes a cup of water can stop 1,000 wars. And sometimes it only feeds the fire. At that moment, the cellar door opened. Noah stepped out with difficulty. When his eyes met his father's, he held his head high, despite all the pain, without losing his pride. The tribal warriors lined up one by one, and for the first time in his life, Elias stood in the middle of a community both as protector and protected. But the real explosion came when Lucas made one last move, shouting, "Either you hand him over now or blood will spill on this land." Guns were drawn, and everyone held their breath. And in that moment, Elias's long-standing loneliness was over. In the heart of fate, a real test had begun. In the ranch yard, two separate groups stood facing each other in the darkness, staring each other down. Elias still hadn't put down his rifle, but at this point, he sensed it would take more than weapons. Anna stayed by Noah's side, not taking her eyes off him for a second to make sure he didn't collapse again. The old tribal leader looked at his son and said, "You came back and you're alive. But what will the cost be?" His voice carried a mix of shaky pride and deep concern. Lucas, trying to hide his fear, put on an aggressive front. "This will be a night of justice. Someone from the tribe killed an innocent man. We're going to settle it right here." The old leader's eyes turned ice cold. "Are you looking for justice or revenge?" Lucas and his men had realized they no longer held the upper hand, but they weren't the kind to back down easily. More and more warriors began to gather around, taking sides under the tribal markings. A silence full of tension wrapped around the ranch, ready to explode at any moment. Just then, Anna whispered to Elias, "Someone is lying, and they want to pay for it in blood." As Elias took in her words, Eric, standing beside Lucas, pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and showed it to him. Lucas glanced at it, and his face went pale. "What now?" Eric asked, his voice almost mocking. At that moment, Noah pulled himself together and stepped out in front of the crowd, raising his voice. "My name is Noah. A trap was set to frame me for a crime. The real criminals want both sides to tear each other apart. The ones who want my blood will do anything to cover up their own darkness." Elias stepped forward. "I just helped a man. But now I understand it's not just about protecting one person anymore. It's about saving the peace between all of us." The tribal leader fell silent for a moment after hearing Elias's words. Then, one of the tribal warriors pulled out a bundle of documents and a sealed letter from his saddlebag. The old man showed them to Lucas and said, "I've seen your name and your men's in the agreements. I know exactly who sabotaged the peace." Lucas suddenly reached for his weapon, but Elias, Anna, and Noah stepped in at once. Some of Lucas's men backed off in shock, but Eric and a few others still tried to stand by him, out of loyalty. A brief but deadly skirmish broke out in the ranch yard. The tribal warriors and Elias's resistance quickly overpowered Lucas's men. As a final effort, Lucas aimed his gun at the tribal leader. But in that instant, Noah, using the last of his strength, threw himself between his father and Lucas. As the bullet tore through the night, Elias lunged forward and brought Lucas down. The gun hit the ground. The only sound left echoing in the yard was the groan from Noah as he fell. Anna rushed to Noah, while the old leader cradled his son in his arms. Elias secured Lucas with cuffs, and the tribal warriors took full control of the ranch yard. Everything was becoming clear now: the documents, the letters, and who was truly guilty. Noah lay on the ground, gasping for air, looking at Elias with pain and pride in his eyes. "That one cup of water you gave me, it saved hundreds of lives," he said, his voice barely audible. Elias nodded, eyes full of tears. "Sometimes kindness to a stranger can save an entire people, Noah." A new silence had fallen over the ranch. In that stillness, while the first light of morning crept in, everyone had chosen their side. and they realized the real war had always been about facing the truth. The storm had passed, but nothing would ever be the same again. At dawn, a thin veil of mist settled over the ranch yard. The chaos of the night, the blood and the sound of gunfire was behind them. Everyone was exhausted, yet waiting in a strange kind of peace. Anna was still tending to Noah's wound, battling the fear that gnawed at her with every breath he took. The tribal warriors stood around the perimeter like watchful sentries. Elias, sitting right in the middle of the ranch beside the old tribal leader, felt for the first time in his life like he belonged to something greater than himself. By the end of the night, Lucas and Eric sat on the ground with their hands tied. False accusations, secret deals that had sabotaged peace, and betrayal from within had all been laid bare through letters and witness accounts. When the tribal leader read the documents aloud, not only did his own people bow their heads, but even some of Lucas's men looked down in shame. That moment made Elias realize something. Sometimes the quiet evils are exposed only in the shadow of the most unexpected acts of kindness. Noah slowly sat up in his father's arms, his voice shaky but filled with pride. "What kept me alive was the water you gave me and your belief in me, Elias. But now I see, what this land really needed wasn't just peace, it was trust." The old tribal leader placed a hand on Elias's shoulder and spoke in a slow, ceremonial tone. "What you did today is greater than a victory in battle. You are now a brother to us, not just for giving water but for not abandoning your conscience in the face of fear." One by one, the tribal warriors came to Elias, placing their hands on his shoulder. Some bowed their heads, some met his eyes, but each one welcomed him as one of their own. The old leader then handed Elias a ceremonial war spear decorated with feathers and stones, a sacred heirloom of the tribe. This spear is not just a weapon, it is a symbol of peace. Today, for the first time, it is being given to someone who is not of our people. Your courage will be told for generations. With tears in her eyes, Anna whispered, "Sometimes, even a single bowl of water can change the course of the world." Elias realized that he, once a solitary farmer, was now the honored guest of a whole people. As the morning sun rose, the tribal warriors, following their leader's orders, took Lucas and Eric with them to be judged by the tribe's own laws. Anna hugged Elias and Noah tightly as they said their goodbyes. Noah stood beside his father, eyes filled with hope and a new resolve after all the chaos he'd lived through. Peace was never easily earned on this land. But today I learned sometimes it's not great weapons that change fate, but a small act of kindness, he said. As the day slowly settled into a new quiet, Elias sat alone on his ranch. But he wasn't really alone. In his heart, he carried the brotherhood of a tribe. In his hand, the spear that symbolized both war and peace. And in his soul, the warmth of Anna and the gratitude of Noah. What had happened through the night hadn't just opened a new chapter for that land, but for the future of humanity itself. Because sometimes, a journey that begins with a cup of water unites a people, delivers justice, and bridges two worlds. Sometimes, it turns enemies into brothers, and true courage is simply staying human in the face of fear. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Because sometimes, one person's small act of kindness can change the history of an entire people.